Hello, McQueen's Hatters and otherwise. Happy holidays, and for my Christmas celebrators, Merry Christmas! Today, I'm going to be reading a special, very special AI fan fiction, as I do. And this time, instead of being about Megamind, Vector, and the rest, it is going to be about the Santa Claus. The Santa Claus, as in the movies. Not the series, because I haven't seen it. The Santa Claus 4, The Transition Clause. Like my title there? I thought of that myself. Everyone knows that if you kill Santa and put on his coat, you become Santa. But what happens when a pre-op trans man puts on the suit? He gets the male body he's always wanted, at the small price of becoming Santa. So this is based on the movies, but also like Danny Gonzalez's song, where it's like common knowledge about Santa, what happens if you kill him. His name was Jim, a trans man living with his parents in an apartment in the city. He was 21 and didn't want to live without any kind of clothing covering him. He'd been working at Target for over 4 years now, and no one knew that he was transgender. His parents were okay with it, as long as he kept it a secret from them. He never thought about taking off his clothes for any other reason than to use the bathroom. He had been in the store for an hour waiting for his turn at the men's section. All the other people seemed to be happy and relaxed. He wished he could be able to feel comfortable with himself the way they did. He looked down at himself, trying to make sure everything was still in place. A woman walking by gave him a strange look. "Everything all right, dear? You seem nervous." Jim felt ashamed of his discomfort. "I'm fine, thanks, Mrs. C." She left before Jim could say anything else. When it was his turn to choose between his boxers and briefs, he decided on one pair each. He put them on and tried not to think about how much smaller his legs made them look. His skin felt tight against them as he slipped them on. When he was finished choosing between his underpants and socks, he picked up a few boxes of chocolate-covered strawberries to take home. He's choosing between his underwear and socks. Is he picking out a pair of each, or is he, like, do I wear underwear or do I wear socks? Because I can only pick one. Maybe he's just that poor. Jim grabbed the box and carried it out to the register. A customer had just walked up to the cashier while he was gone, but Jim had already given up on her paying attention to him. He started back toward the front of the store, only to run into someone running in the opposite direction. He stopped to apologize, but she ran past him, almost bumping him with her cart as she headed out the door. He waited until everyone else had left before heading back into the store. It wasn't until he was alone that he realized something was wrong. He couldn't tell what exactly was wrong, but there definitely wasn't enough air. Chapter 2, The Switch. The store is hot and crowded, and Jim can feel his eyes start to burn. Every breath he takes feels heavy and labored. There's a constant pressure on the back of his neck. He tries to move away from the source, but there are too many people packed in behind him. He can barely see straight. His stomach rolls unpleasantly, threatening to spill its contents all over the floor. He starts to panic. He has to get out of there. A hand grabs his shoulder, making him jump. "Sir, please, stay calm." Jim can feel tears starting to well up in his eyes, but he shakes it off. He can't let anyone see that he's crying. Not yet. "No, I have to go." He pushes away from the hand, hoping that whoever was behind him will believe him. The employee tries again to hold on to him. "Sir, please, we can talk this through. We won't want any problems here." "You're making me upset. Please, just let me leave." Before the employee had a chance to respond, Jim turns around and bolts. He ignores the calls that ring in his ears as he runs through the mall, looking desperately for some place he can get outside where he might be able to breathe. There, he finds a bench tucked away from the traffic, a park bench. Maybe the fresh air will do him some good. If nothing else, maybe he can get himself together enough to head home. When he gets to the bench, he collapses, burying his face in his hands. He doesn't know how long he's been sitting there when he looks up. He realizes he's shaking and stops. What he sees makes his heart drop. It's two men dressed in suits, and they've surrounded him. They're laughing, their arms crossed over their chests as they stare at him from across the street. One of them raises his arm and points directly at him. Without thinking, Jim jumps up and runs. When he returns home, Jim immediately heads to his room, closing the door and locking it behind him. He leans against the wall and slides down to sit on the floor. The adrenaline rush from earlier has disappeared as quickly as it came, leaving him feeling sick and shaky. Jim wraps his arms around himself and lets out a slow, shuddering breath. He'll just lie here until dinner. That should calm him down. He lies down in bed and closes his eyes, but sleep doesn't come. He lays there listening to his mother cooking dinner, wondering if he should try to join them. Jim spends most of the day in bed, watching television and scrolling mindlessly through his phone. He's just like me, for real. It's dark by the time he hears the front door open, signaling his father's return. He drifts awake, hearing his father moving around and talking quietly to his mother. When he hears his name, though, he freezes. Jimbo, we need to talk. I love how he's called Jimbo. Jim swallows hard, his throat dry. Is he going to yell at him or send him away again? Jim sits up in bed, his heart pounding. Okay, Dad, what is it? His dad moves further into the bedroom, standing beside his bed. Look, buddy, your mom and I have noticed something different about you. Jim's eyes went in suddenly. What do you mean, Dad? What do you mean different? We saw you in the grocery store, and then we saw you leaving Target. Jim stares at the floor. Well, I guess there are things you guys aren't supposed to know. He'd been planning to tell his parents eventually, but he hadn't expected it to happen so soon. Maybe it's better to get it over with. Jimbo, you have to stop keeping secrets from us. It's bad for your health. We don't want you doing something stupid like that ever again. Do you understand me? Jim nods, unable to speak. Yes, sir. Good boy. Now go brush your teeth. Dinner will be ready in about 5 minutes, and you need to pick out your pajamas tonight. With that said, his father leaves the room, closing the door softly behind him. He goes back to brushing his teeth, but every time he finishes, Jim's stomach lurches again. He can't believe he's actually planning on doing this. But what choice does he really have? He has to kill Santa. The words replay themselves over and over again in his brain until they feel like a mantra. He hates having to kill Santa, but that's part of being a trans person. He mulled over his plan again during dinner, eating silently while pretending to watch television. So, Jimbo, his father says after finishing his meal, how was work today? Jim thinks for a minute before answering. It was okay. Some things are happening today that I want to talk to you about the other day. He trails off, unsure of how to bring it up. But, you guys were right. I shouldn't have left without telling you. I'm sorry. His dad nods knowingly. And why do you think that you can't stay home anymore? Well, there's something going on. Someone's coming to town. Jim knows he sounds weak and helpless, but he doesn't care. He needs to protect his family. He doesn't want anything to happen to them. He'd never forgive himself if he did. Who's coming to town? His mother asks, concern written all over her face. Are they dangerous? No, not at all. Not usually. It's just... He pauses. He wishes there were another way. He wishes he could say no and have everything be fine. He wishes he could tell his parents everything would be okay and keep it that way. Just what, honey? His mom urges gently. Her gaze meets Jim's across the table. She wants to help him. She knows he won't open up if it isn't completely safe and normal, but even so, she'd much rather find out now than later. Jim bites his lip before speaking, trying to figure out how he can best explain what he's feeling without saying something he regrets. Remember last month when he told me I had to choose between a job and school? Both adults nod. They remember how Jim felt when he heard he wouldn't be attending high school anymore. Last month, I made my decision. The words hang heavily in the room. They're waiting for him to continue, hoping that he means it, hoping that he's truly dedicated to give up everything and go away for good. Jim takes a deep breath and continues, I chose to join the army, just like I said I would. His parents look surprised. But wait, Jimbo, you don't want to serve in the army. You love science. His mom frowns, confused. Why would you choose this? Isn't science your favorite subject? He shrugs, suddenly uncomfortable under his parents' curious stares. Well, when I was little, I always liked stories more, so my favorite story is from books. Stories about soldiers who fight to protect others in the world from evil beings. There's an army in Korea, and I was thinking about joining. Jim's parents both stare at him. He feels small under their gazes, his chest tightening and anxiety building in his stomach. Suddenly, he can hardly breathe. He can barely make sense of the questions that fill silence in his house, let alone answer them. His dad breaks the silence. Do you realize you could lose your life? Do you really want to put everything at risk? Jim shakes his head. I know, but if I don't, who will? You could die, Jimbo! His mother shouts. They both jump, and Jim winces at the volume of her voice. But what else could he have said? He is going away, and he is going to kill somebody. Mom, he cries, don't raise your voice, please. His voice trembles as he pleads with her. Jim can't take any more of this yelling. He gets up from the couch and rushes towards his room. When he walks past his parents, he hears his mother mutter under her breath in Spanish. He slams his door shut and pulls out his gun from beneath his mattress, loading it with bullets. He places the gun on the nightstand and takes a few calming breaths. He runs a hand through his hair and exhales shakily, running his other hand over his stomach. Just breathe. Just breathe. He sits on the edge of his bed and takes another deep breath, turning off his light. I can do this. I can do this. Jim climbs onto the top bunk of his bed, placing his gun against his pillow. Then taking one final deep breath, he closes his eyes and waits. Chapter 2. Again. Jim waits. The room is still and quiet except for the gentle breeze wafting through his window. You can hear his father's labored breathing. As quietly as possible, he slides off his bed and makes his way towards his parents' bedroom. Carefully, he peeks inside the door to make sure that they're both asleep. They haven't stirred yet. Taking that as a sign, he steps quietly into the hall. He makes his way down the stairs, careful not to wake anyone else in the house. The Christmas lights blink slowly, casting a soft glow on the living room, kitchen, and dining room. When Jim reaches the bottom of the staircase, he looks around nervously, seeing nothing but darkness. The only sound comes from a few snowflakes tapping outside the glass windows out on the porch, creating a soft white noise. Jim tiptoes along the hallway, avoiding the creaking wood boards. He moves quietly to the front door, opening it very carefully. Once he finds the handle, he lets the door swing open, the hinges squeaking softly. Jim holds the door open, making sure not to hit the ceiling and alert everyone else inside the house. There's no one visible outside, although there isn't enough moonlight to show clearly where the tree is. With one hand resting firmly on the door frame and the other wrapped around his gun, Jim creeps closer, keeping his feet as silent as possible. As he approaches the tree, he starts to climb, moving from branch to branch, to tree, to avoid falling. Once he's close enough, he grabs a branch and hoists himself up, looking around. There, that should be it. Moving forward cautiously, he lowers himself onto the trunk and kneels beside the tree. His heart is pounding in his ears. He doesn't know whether or not he's able to pull it off, but the idea that he might get to shoot Santa is enough to calm him somewhat. He reaches for the bag and takes out a silver bullet, holding it tightly in his hands. So apparently he needs a silver bullet, which means Santa is some sort of mythical creature. He takes a moment to glance around the tree. Everything seems to be in order. He glances at his watch. 7:45 p.m., the countdown begins. Hours in the tree later, he finally hears sleigh bells ringing, announcing the arrival of his target. The sound reverberates throughout his surroundings, filling Jim with excitement as he quickly stands and pulls the gun out. He sees the reindeer standing by the gate and then sees a familiar red hat. Santa Claus stands before him. At first, Jim is too nervous to move. He's afraid he might miss his mark, but then, remembering everything that has led him here, his nerves seem to fade away as his mind clears and he remembers exactly where he is. "Hello there, young man," Santa greets in his booming voice. Jim jumps suddenly. He hadn't heard him approach. He must have been too focused on trying to aim properly to notice him. "Good evening, sir. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," Santa repeats with a kind smile. He's dressed in his usual red suit. Red velvet cape hangs from his shoulders. A matching red bow sits neatly atop his head. The bells and tinsel surrounding his body sparkle brightly in the moonlight, almost blinding, making it difficult for Jim to see him well. "What brings you here?" Santa asks, peering intently at Jim. Jim blushes and fiddles uncomfortably with his sleeve. "Well, you see, Santa laughs softly and raises one bushy eyebrow as he looks up to the night sky. "I'm sorry to say, son, you have quite a ways to go before you get your wish." Jim nods, biting his lower lip as he tries to think of a believable excuse. "I know that." He pauses again. "But, he struggles again to find the correct thing to say. Spit it out, boy," Santa says, grinning at him mischievously. Jim swallows, his throat dry and his mouth suddenly parched. He glances around again before grabbing hold of Santa's gloved hand. He stares directly into his sparkling blue eyes, praying that he understands how much he wants this, how much he needs this. Santa smiles gently at him. "Go ahead, say it." Jim opens his mouth to speak but stops. What should he ask? Should he tell him about his dream? About the feeling of power rushing through his veins whenever he held the trigger, ready to fire at any moment? Maybe he would understand. Maybe Santa wouldn't have to die. I need a male body," he whispers. For the second time that night, Santa stares at him blankly, not seeming to understand his words. "I'm trans, and I can't get surgery," Jim explains, his voice rising with each word as panic begins to set in. So I had to try something different, something illegal, but illegal nonetheless. So I could be a boy, like every other boy. Finally, Santa understands Jim's meaning. He smiles, understanding him better now. You mean it? Jim nods frantically. Yes, he breathes. Santa looks shocked, but then he chuckles, breaking the tension between them and giving Jim a huge hug. I'm so happy to meet you, Jim. Jim hugs back, feeling tears form in his eyes. After a minute, Santa pulls away and puts a hand on Jim's shoulder. All right, let's finish up here. You know the rules, Jim. If something happens to me, put on the suit. Jim shuffled awkwardly. So, do I just shoot you now, or... Santa shakes his head slowly. No, son. We need time. We still need to figure things out. Now get inside my sleigh, he says, gesturing to the small sleigh behind him. Jim grins sheepishly as he climbs up into the sleigh. It feels surprisingly warm compared to the cool weather outside. Santa wraps his cape around Jim. Jim leans over and whispers in his ear, Thank you. Thank you so much. He leans back again. Santa smiles. If someone kills me, you get dibs. If someone kills me, you get dibs, got it? Otherwise, I'd be happy to make you my apprentice. I wrote more to this. Where is the rest of it? Oh my goodness. Okay, that's weird. There used to be more. I guess I'll write more now. Jim laughs softly. Thank you, he says again as he snuggles further into the blankets around him. I'll make sure to thank you every day for the rest of our lives. Santa gives him a playful swat on the leg as he starts the engine. There's an engine, apparently. Get some sleep, kid, he orders, shaking his finger at him. Okay, Jim agrees, yawning loudly and snuggling even deeper into the blanket. It keeps forgetting that he's in Santa's sleigh right now. It keeps transitioning to a chapter where he's waking up at home. He's not supposed to wake up at home. They're all good ones. Okay, I'll read them all. Chapter 6. In the distance, the clock strikes 7 o'clock. Presumably in the morning because 7 o'clock's already happened. But neither Jim nor Santa hear it. Instead, they both lie fast asleep, wrapped in each other's arms under their favorite blanket of all times, the old, warm, blue plaid wool blanket they had bought together for Christmas many years ago. Within minutes, his eyes began to droop shut. Sleep tight. And without warning, Santa takes off across the street at breakneck speed, leaving Jim alone on the tree. And that's not supposed to happen. He's in the sleigh with him. Night, Santa. Santa pulls his hoodie off over his head and places it under Jim's headboard. As Santa watches Jim fall asleep, he strokes his long brown hair affectionately and whispers, "Sweet dreams, kid." Chapter 9. It was another perfect snowy Christmas day. I think I'll keep that last one. Perfect as it can possibly be for an entire household full of crazy people living under a roof filled with strange smells and noises. The wind blows cold air against Jim's cheek, bringing goosebumps up and running a chill up his spine. It's quiet. Everyone is sleeping save for Jim, who is sitting on the couch with a hot cup of coffee in his... Cocoa! It's supposed to be cocoa. I'm changing it. Who is sitting on the couch with a hot cup of cocoa in his hands. To his mug, watching the steam rise into the air as he thinks about how today will go. Today will be the first day he has to prove himself to Santa Claus, as well as the whole family. He's excited about both of these things, but more importantly, he's excited about what it means to become Santa's assistant. As Jim stares down into the warm liquid in the mug, he sighs happily and takes a sip. Warmth spreads through his body as he smiles contentedly. I think I'm going to leave it for now. I do have to go soon.